Welcome to the Road to Regulation, a history of food safety. In Episode 1, we journey back before the modern world of food labels, sanitation standards, and expiration dates. Back to a time when kitchens were chaotic, food was mysterious, and safety was more hope than guarantee. Our story begins in the good old days, or maybe the bad old days, depending on how you feel about cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis. Now, let's focus in on the United States, because our story starts there. Before the 1800s, food production was hyper-local. People bought bread from the baker, meat from the butcher, and milk from the neighbor's cow. It was a close-knit community of commerce, but as cities grew, so did the length of the food chain. Soon people were eating foods that came from further and further away. That meant fewer personal connections and more mystery. But the real game-changer was industrialization. Suddenly, people could produce massive amounts of food quickly and cheaply, and consumers loved it. Can you blame them? Who wouldn't want more food for less money? But this convenience came at a cost. See, as soon as the food left the farm or factory, it entered an unpredictable world. Warehouses sometimes dumped spoiled goods out the window to make room for more product. Railroad workers routinely added sawdust to their soup to stretch it. And when street vendors sold pastries filled with something resembling custard, they probably were. Now, these might seem like isolated incidents, but they reflect a larger truth. The rules of food safety didn't exist yet, and what's more, the idea of germs was still unknown. So if your food made you sick, well, there was no way to know why. Of course, some common sense prevailed. No one knowingly sold rotten meat or moldy bread, but the baseline of safety was basically zero. The law didn't protect consumers from fraud or contamination, nor did it require food to be fit for human consumption. As a result, a trip to the grocery store could be a gamble. Consider that many ingredients were adulterated with whatever was cheap, convenient, or just lying around. Bread, for example, was sometimes whitened with chalk. Not only did this make the bread look better, but the flour that was left behind was saved and used for more bread, making it easier to feed a growing population. Another popular additive was plaster, which gave bread a nice little kick of calcium. And don't forget sawdust, which can be found in everything from soups to sausages. Speaking of sausages, the mystery of ingredients wasn't limited to baked goods. One London physician wrote of a butcher who cut up cat and dog carcasses and mixed them into his sausage, saving himself money and stretching his stock. And he wasn't alone. In 1857, an Ohio newspaper reported that Cincinnati's German sausage makers were serving up a delicious blend of pork and rat meat. If you're worried about rat meat today, don't be. Rats are a valuable source of protein, and their meat has been enjoyed throughout history. Just kidding. Rat meat still sucks, but that doesn't mean you should stop learning about the history of food safety. Now, what if you wanted a beverage with your meal? Maybe a glass of wine. Well, there's a good chance that wine had been sweetened with lead. You see, wine sellers often stretched their profits by adding lead acetate, or sugar of lead, to their stock. Since lead compounds have a sweet taste and a pleasant smell, they were perfect for disguising vinegar or low-quality wine. And they weren't just used once. One English physician estimated that lead acetate was added to wine 3 times during its journey from vineyard to glass. That's all pretty gross, but does it really matter? After all, people have been drinking lead-laced wine for centuries. Well, actually, no. See, lead is poisonous. Even small amounts can cause permanent damage to the nervous system, kidneys, and other organs. Children are especially vulnerable to lead poisoning. In fact, even today, lead is the most common cause of poisoning deaths in children worldwide. And while lead acetate does give wine a sweet taste, it also killed Napoleon Bonaparte, among many others. As these examples show, the pre-industrial kitchen was a dangerous place, not just for eaters, but for everyone involved in producing and selling food. Now, we can point to individual cases of misconduct, like a greedy butcher or wine seller, but that misses the bigger picture. The problem wasn't so much individual bad actors as much as the entire system. Oversight simply didn't exist. There were no consequences for selling unsafe or mislabeled products. So unethical behavior wasn't just widespread, it was practically risk-free. In fact, there were incentives for cutting corners. Since selling adulterated or mislabeled food meant more profit, it may seem hard to believe today, but up until the 1800s, food fraud was so rampant that con artists actually targeted other con artists. In the early 19th century, Pickpockets would slip packets of sawdust into the pockets of traveling dealers. When the unsuspecting dealers opened the packets to sell their contents, the sawdust would spill everywhere, ruining the sale. These practical jokes aside, the market was flooded with fakes. Take, for example, gin, which could be made from almost anything, including potatoes, sawdust, plaster, and bones. To combat this confusion, a new profession emerged: the food chemist, who analyzed samples of food and drink and published their findings. Sometimes the results were shocking, like when one British chemist found rat poison in a sample of biscuits. Most food chemists weren't employed by the government, but by newspapers, which paid them to expose fraudulent products. One famous American food chemist claimed that half the ginger sold in New York contained sawdust. His research was picked up by newspapers, which published his findings and helped shutter several businesses. It's a great story with a happy ending, except it isn't. The food chemist who cracked down on ginger was Harvey Washington Wiley, one of the most important figures in the fight for food safety. And as it turns out, his career was almost over before it began. That's right, our hero was driven out of his first job after he found rat poison in his product. And that's where we'll pick up next time in the next episode of The Road to Regulation. In the meantime, please enjoy this fun fact. Did you know that back in the 18th century, food safety was quite a different game? People often relied on their senses to judge whether food was safe to eat. Spoiled meat or dairy products were sometimes masked with strong spices or sauces to hide the taste and smell. Can you imagine dining like that? It was a risky business, but it was all part of the culinary adventure of the time. Ready for a little brain workout? Here comes a quiz for you. What do you think the next episode is going to reveal about modern regulations? And hey, how do you think this one wrapped up? Can't wait to hear your guesses. Of course, Harvey Washington Wiley went on to become one of the most important figures in the fight for food safety, helping establish the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, which prohibited the sale of adulterated or misbranded food and created the FDA. But how did he get there? Well, to find out, you'll have to tune in next time on The Road to Regulation. I make videos about all sorts of topics, including the history of food safety. You can watch more of my work on my channel. I publish multiple new episodes every week. So if you like this video, subscribe to come along for the ride. Thanks for watching.